Good morning and good afternoon for everyone who's joined, or good evening if any of you are overseas. This is Ravi Mohan. We're going to give people a minute or two before we begin, just so that they can log into the webinar. So we'll be silent for about 2 minutes. This might be the most challenging part of the whole webinar.
I think it probably is.
I already broke your rule, Jason, of banter.
I wasn't trying to make it a strict rule about no banter. I was just trying to caution against the type of banter.
All right, I think we've given folks enough time to log in. Good morning, my name is Ravi Mohan. I'm the moderator of the panel. I am a managing director at Shasta Ventures, an early stage venture firm that I founded 16 years ago with a couple of other gentlemen, one of whom is here, Jason Pressman. I've been in the venture business for over 24 years and have been investing and helping companies through multiple downturns, the 1998 Asian financial crisis, the 9/11 and post.com crisis, and then most recently the 2008 financial crisis. After all of those downturns, the technology industry has rebounded stronger, and new great companies have emerged from each of those crises. The key now for all of us in the ecosystem and for all the companies and the people is to position ourselves so that we're in as strong shape as ever when the rebound happens. Before we begin, I just wanted to share some perspective from a podcast I listened to from UBS. Let's remember as we go through this tough time to remember our humanity, the brave men and women who are fighting the war against the pandemic all over the world in the terribly afflicted areas like New York, Boston, Lombardy, previously in Wuhan and South Korea, and many other places. We should remember to remain humble. We don't know a lot. We don't know the effects of the pandemic on people's lives, livelihood, impact on business and the economy. We all need to be open to the new information as it presents itself and incorporate it into our thinking and, more importantly, our actions. And lastly, we need to retain our perspective. As we learn more, we need to chart a reasonable course, a course that's balanced and responsible, given all the information we have at hand. Okay. The reason we put this webinar together is to share information, provide perspective, so that everyone can benefit. And the people that we know and people that we don't know can benefit as we move forward. Our agenda is brief introductions of our panelists who are kind enough to give their time today. We have 30 minutes of prepared questions, and then we have audience questions and a wrap up. So first up, my partner, Jason Pressman. He helped found Shasta. We've been investing together for the last 15 years. Interestingly, prior to starting Shasta, Jason was the first business employee at Walmart.com. And that was started in 1999. And he built a $1 billion business through the 9/11, as well as the dot-com implosion that happened after it. So Jason has some comments he'd like to share about what we have been telling our investors.
I'm going to be brief because we want to get to the overall panel discussion, but given that we've had a lot of outreach from our limited partners, our investors, and also from obviously talking to all of our portfolio companies and I'm coaching them, I thought I'd just give a quick synopsis of what our take on the current situation is and how we're coaching companies to think about it to set the frame for the discussion. The first is we will emerge on the other side of this. We don't know exactly when. There's a lot of ambiguity here. But as Ravi said, tech companies have emerged from all other downturns and excelled on the other side. Our current best guess is that the health implications in the US are going to be quite serious, but likely manageable because of the flattening the curve expectations. The health implications globally are far more ambiguous, particularly in the third world, where there could be very serious death issues due to difficulties implementing social distancing and weak healthcare systems. But flowing into the economic impact is also ambiguous. What's very clear is everyone knows we're headed into a recession. My personal view is it's not likely to have a V-shaped recovery. It's likely to be long and protracted before we emerge on the other side. That said, we don't know, but we need to plan and prepare that could be the case, that it's very deep. So each situation as we coach companies is company by company. Some companies, very few, are actually doing well as a result of this pandemic. Unfortunately, companies like Doctor on Demand, a telemedicine company, and Nextdoor, which helps social networks, which is a social network for communities. But most of our companies are already seeing falling demand and very significant softness in pipelines going forward. So what we've coached all of our companies to do is to plan for that and to think through immediately upon the initial take on this whole thing starting about a month ago. We said limit variable expenses, obviously cut travel, T&E, go work from home, and think about not necessarily putting in place a hiring freeze, but potentially a hiring freeze, and certainly think long and hard about replacing any heads that are departing, and think long and hard about whether or not anyone you're adding is truly essential. And then use the next couple of weeks, which really has culminated right around now, to do a planning exercise and think through 3 scenarios: bad, worse, and worst. With bad being roughly, think 20% drop in bookings for the next couple of quarters, worse being kind of 50% for 3 to 4 quarters, and worst case being thinking about 75 to 100% drop in top line and significant churn for kind of 8 quarters. And through those plans, come out on the other side with, can you get to cash flow positive in each of those scenarios? And or if not, can you conserve cash for a minimum of 24 months, but at least 36, assuming that the fundraising environment is very challenged. And just remember that cash is important. Cash is oxygen. Oxygen is life for companies. And companies that cut earlier in these types of situations typically don't have to go as deep, and then have the balance sheet and the nimbleness to actually start to grow when things emerge on the other side. Some of our companies, and we'll talk about that today, have already implemented cuts. Some are still in the process of evaluating. But I just wanted to share the guidance that we've been giving to folks, and I think that that's still relevant for everyone today.
So next, I wanted to introduce my partner, Isaac Roth. Isaac joined Shasta full-time with us recently. He's a 2-time founder of Shasta-backed companies. And he started his first company, Makara, during the financial crisis of 2007 and 8. He raised capital through that period and then led the company post the 2008 event to a successful exit at Red Hat in 2010. And Isaac wanted to share with you some resources we've put together at Shasta to help people.
Hi, yeah, so along what Jason said, actually wrote up a post with sort of the guidance that he just gave, as well as the compilation of other guidance that the partnership has produced and my own experience. And that's on the Shasta blog or Medium. So on Medium, it's Shasta VC. So that's sort of a how-to guide of how to think about how things are happening right now. And then we've also assembled recently a job board assembly where we're collecting folks who are looking for opportunities, as well as companies that are hiring during this time. And not only collecting those individuals, but also collecting the various lists that are coming out of the different replanning exercises at companies throughout the industry. And that is also on the Shasta Medium account, Shasta VC. So please check that out. And if you know of companies that have assembled such lists, we're collecting them there and trying to make the data more accessible to everyone, so that those companies involved in a few that are looking for talent right now, there's incredible talent available, and they can easily find those people.
Okay, next panelist is Randy Nicolau. Randy Nicolau is also a two-time Shasta CEO. We've backed him twice. Like Isaac, he started a company, Demdex, during the financial crisis of 2008. He is now CEO, which he then led to a successful exit with Adobe. He's now CEO of Poppin, a leading edge furniture design, creator, manufacturer, and deliverer of great furniture, office furniture. Their company has suffered dramatically because of the pandemic. They were doing amazingly well until this hit. And he can share with you how he has dealt with real challenges with demand falling off the cliff just because of the pandemic, and how he's responded and how his team has responded. Next is Will Hayes. Will Hayes is the CEO of LucidWorks. He joined there 5 years ago or 6 years ago, first as the chief product officer and then as CEO, and has led a massive turnaround at that company. That company has grown from next to nothing to over 50 million of annual recurring revenue. Will was smart and fortunate to raise a lot of capital last year and is well positioned to weather the downturn, as Jason talked about. And lastly is Evan Liang. Evan's someone that I've known for 20 years now. He and I have worked together in multiple roles. He has been able to see how venture capitalists have advised companies through the downturns post 9/11, as well as through the financial crisis, when he worked with me at Battery Ventures and at Shasta Ventures. And now he's a first-time CEO of Lean Data and has built a $25 million ARR company that's been growing nicely. He also was fortunate to raise capital last year and is well capitalized to ride through this, assuming that he makes the right decisions and makes the right calls over the next few months. So that's our panelists. Our agenda is quite simple. We're going to go through some prepared questions that we've thought about that we thought would be useful to share. That'll be about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to audience questions after that. So thank you again. Thank you, panelists. So the first question I want to ask, and Randy, let me just start with you, is
Sure.
How have you managed and led during this time of uncertainty?
First of all, thank you for giving me a reason to wake up and shower today. It was long overdue.
You look good.
There's an expression about people who, come into wealth, like when you sell your company, it says it doesn't change who you are, it just makes you more of who you are. If you were generous, you become more generous. If you're a jerk, you become more of a jerk. I've always found that leading through crisis, that same thing applies to both your management team and your company culture. So those leaders on your team who are a little bit more needy and a little bit more insecure become more needy and more insecure, and your strong leaders and more strategic leaders become even stronger during this time. And so what I've had to do is anticipate those changes in behaviors because of this, and shift swim lanes, and really make sure that I've got folks that are even stronger in these times stepping over into other swim lanes, maybe forming steering committees to give them a little bit more formal power over some of the decision making, knowing that it's a time where I can't be involved in every decision because I now have a whole new set of responsibilities. We have 3 offices in China, 2 employees who were in Wuhan at the time of the lockdown, the first half of this was dealing with the supply side, which fooled us all a little bit, how quickly China came back. And, within 2 months, let's call it from kind of mid-January to mid-March, and now we're running about 80-90% over there. Fooled us a little bit in terms of thinking about how quickly we could recover here. And it's clear from Jason's comments, everyone's comments, we're in for a much longer impact on the demand side than we were on the supply side. So when we're thinking about, modeling, as Jason put, because of the industry we're in, we have to look at 0 revenue assumptions across the next quarter or so, not the 20 and 40 and 70% downs. So it was really getting the team prepared to deal with that reality and make sure that we could weather the storm and know that we have to do it on our own.
When you mean 0 revenue, it's 0 revenue that you've modeled in, correct? How do you survive?
We have modeled in 0. Now we're still getting bookings, but for example, our warehouse in San Francisco is closed. They had an outbreak. Their employees went on unemployment and they refused to come back to the warehouse and start shipping product to the customers that we have in parts of the country that are open and able to take deliveries. the challenge that it posed when we were doing the modeling is obviously you think about, okay, there's no revenue, so you're not going to have the receivables, and we're asset-based borrowers, so those receivables are important. But what we never calculated or didn't think about at the time was that all the inventory that we have coming that's now stuck at the port that doesn't have a place to go, if I can't take delivery, I can't borrow against it. So it impacts my cash flow. So it's a whole new dynamic in terms of thinking about, are your receivables real? And can you get access to those assets that you usually borrow against, which, on the West Coast, we're having a hard time doing that.
Wow. Will, as you think about your employee base, how do you think about keeping their morale and for the team, your leadership team? How do you make sure that people acknowledge their uncertainty, but make them feel reassured?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things here, unlike other crises, is you have to be very empathetic to the fact that people experience things much differently. Whether it's distractions at home, having to set up, kids for school, worrying about aging parents, worrying about the community, worrying about their own personal health, mental health. And so number one is just empathy. Understanding that we're going to have to meet people in their situations. We're going to support them through their situations. I advise folks away from kind of trying to put blanket policies over how you deal with individual scenarios. Because again, it's just the way people are experiencing this type of crisis is there's a huge spectrum. But first comes empathy. Number two has got to be intensity, a sense of mission, keeping people engaged, particularly as we're working in these sort of distributed work environments now that not everybody was used to. We're about 50-50 at Lucid Work. So half our team was already distributed, set up to work from home, half coming into the office. And so ensuring that engagement, whether, we're maintaining closeness with customers and partners and relationships, continuing to drive transactions, continuing to work on processes and things that are important to building more foundation into the business. It's important that we stay on top of.
Sorry, can you just give an example of a specific example in terms of either customer or product or anything that keeps people engaged, something tangible?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again, depending on roles and responsibilities, but what's important is that we have to have a heightened sense of connection with these employees. So for instance, training. We always have a backlog of technical training, of enablement that we want to do internally. This is a great time for folks. I tell my team, invest in yourself, if nothing else, and continue to invest in yourself so we can come out of this stronger. But you can't just say that. Again, there's a lot of distractions, social media, news posts happening 24/7. So implementing policies where we're actually measuring engagement, ensuring that people know that they have a sense of mission, if you will. And then really stretching folks beyond their comfort zone, beyond their job description. Jason mentioned things like hiring freezes. I mean, the number one job of the CEO right now is to manage cost as effectively as possible. And what this can mean is really having people work cross-functionally across the organization, taking on roles and responsibilities that may not be central to that job description. And it provides that sense of mission, which drives the engagement and the intensity and keeps people focused on the mission at hand and kind of drowned out the noise, if you will.
Okay. Hey, Evan, if you could comment, one of the things I think is super hard is we're talking about making cuts, we're talking about or limiting expenditure to try to emerge as strong as possible. Clearly, one of that is the balance sheet, but having a strong of balance sheet to be able to invest when growth happens. How do you think about the other core assets at Lean Data? What do you believe are the key assets that you have, and how are you thinking about maintaining that or strengthening them during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Ravi. I think that's part of this is trying to think about what is the state of the world at the other end, right? And how do you want to take advantage of and make sure that you come out that other end much more stronger. So for us, I mean, the core assets, the things that I kind of stress to people is really around our customers, right? So we have to be, as much as we're empathetic to our employees, as much as Will says, we also have to be empathetic to our customers. Think through which customers are going to be suffering, and let's be empathetic and be there for them and get their trust and have them know that we're there for them now and throughout this entire process. And so we want to come out the other side with stronger relationships with our customers, not weaker because of what's going on out there. So where we're trying to invest a lot in around, and customers first has always been a mantra inside of Lean Data, but we're almost doubling down on that. So we're taking advantage of this time to do a lot of things to increase customer marketing, increase customer communication. And what I mean by that, it's not just sending out an email saying, hey, everyone's working from home and stuff like that. I think we've all gotten a lot of those emails, but tangible things like we had launched a certification program. We made it virtual right away. Those have been sold out every single week that we've been doing it, so people can get better learning and training. We've also launched a community. So just like you guys did a job board, we launched a community this past week to give people a forum to come together and share insights and best practices and do stuff like that. So I would add our core assets are definitely employees, customers, and then also just thinking about how do we continue to manage our processes, improve things. I love what Will said about how to take this opportunity to do more training and how to help people improve each other and have that sense of mission.
You know, one thing that I do think that I've heard from Will and I've heard from Evan, and it is actually a good time, is that in a startup, you know, we're always frantic. We have to be frantic because of demand with all the activities that we have. One of the advantages that we have right now is for us to build the infrastructure for our growth in the future, because we'll have the time to set up the processes, think through the processes we need to better build product, serve our customers better, and then to actually implement them with systems and then instrument them. And it is something that I've heard from multiple CEOs that they're working on. And I would highly encourage people to take that time to invest in the employee base with their learning, as well as invest in the company so that we have the right systems and processes to scale. Randy, I'm going to ask you a tough question because you've had the toughest thing to do. When you have zero revenue and you have these financials, I assume that you've had to implement some deep, painful cuts. How have you done that? How have you thought about it? How have you communicated it? And how should people handle that? Because you've gone through this just recently.
Yeah, we did that on Monday. Look, it goes back to one of the previous comments I made about, you know, if you had a strong culture heading into these types of cuts, I do believe it's possible to emerge with an even stronger one. These are unprecedented times. When have you ever had to lay people off where 100% of them are remote? And so what we opted for was to give people certainty as quickly as possible as to what was happening to their own individual situation. So if we had taken the time to call every employee or set up groups where, you know, this list might get on this Zoom call and this list another, it would lead uncertainty. Am I on this list? Am I on that list, et cetera? So what I did was I addressed the entire company and was very forthright, saying we are making dramatic cuts both to headcount and to salaries, and we're doing it effectively. Immediately, here's all the things we have tried to preserve jobs, but here are the headwinds that we face. And I said, we're actually, you know, are going to do it in the least, you know, we talk about not trying to suck. Anytime you do this, it sucks. You just want to do it in the least sucky way possible. And I said, we're going to do this in the least personal way possible, which is, hey, you've now heard this impassioned speech from me about what's happening. As soon as I, you know, turn off the Zoom, everyone's going to immediately get an email so they know their status. So at least at that moment, they knew their status. And then another hour after that came all the details. Here's your severance. Here's what's happening, you know, with your healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And if I were to show you the responses, the emails and texts I got, and I redacted them for if it was somebody who was laid off or somebody who was still with us, you would not be able to tell the difference. There was a ton of appreciation, acknowledgement that, you know, that they felt that this was the right way, to hear it from the proverbial horse's mouth first, but then to find out very quickly where they stood, and then find out later exactly what that meant for them. I think it was as good as it could have gone, given how crappy the situation is.
So to summarize what you just said, number one, address everyone at the same time, explain the situation in a forthright manner, tell them that the broad actions that were going to happen, and then get off and immediately inform people about their personal status.
Correct.
Okay. That's anything that you would change from that based upon reflection?
Actually, no. Again, you know, it's a little bit of selection bias, right? The people that did reach out were people who were, you know, okay with it. But when we look at how quickly people, you know, we use DocuSign for everybody to either acknowledge their pay reductions or to acknowledge their separation packages, and the speed with which we got those back told me that we did a good job of explaining, answering all their questions throughout this kind of day-long process. It started at around noon and kind of ended by 5 o'clock with all the various information sessions that we had scheduled afterwards. So no, I really wouldn't, other than not wanting to be in that situation at all.
Hey, Evan, let's just switch topics a little bit to budgeting and cash management and planning. What is the framework that you've used for the replan? How's that might have changed over the last 3 weeks as you've been thinking about different replans? What are the overriding goals that you have now? And what are the scenarios? Jason outlined the advice that we've given, but what are you doing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the first framework that we put into place around those scenarios is what are the triggers and what are the key things that us as a management team is going to constantly monitor and look at what puts us into each of these different scenarios and plans. And so it was really important for us as a management team to agree on those triggers, make those hard metrics that we could all see, right? And as a management team, and we also shared those with our investors. So it was actually a framework. And the interesting part was it was also the same framework that we used similarly for determining when we went to work from home. So us as a company, we're primarily in the office. And so we use that same framework while we were watching the health pandemic to rise out. And we're like, if it hits this level of a seriousness, we're going to go to this. We started with kind of like, for example, we did a practice run of everyone working from home, right? And then as it got worse, then we moved to mandatory work from home. And similarly, that's kind of the framework we put in place to manage across our different plans. And then from there, I think what we're doing is, as a management team, being very honest and transparent with each other and actively looking for all those signals. What are the positive signals and what are the potential warning signs to help us determine where we go into those plans. Now, the flip side is we are in a fortunate position to have a strong balance sheet. And because of that, I don't think we have actually needed to go to doing something that Randy has outlined where we have to lay folks off, and we believe we can last through this crisis. But at the same time, we have done some little things around being conservative and being even more capital efficient, such that we can have the long runway in the given scenarios. And it does help to do little things early on. Because I know Ravi and I were together during some of these crises, and when we were looking at helping portfolio companies, I definitely remember if we had done this a little bit early, we would be in a better position now, right? And the tiniest little things add up to quite a bit, right? Even things like the T&E. I remember like a magazine subscription at one company. You just add those up over many, many months. That becomes quite a bit of cash that you can be in cushion with. For most of our employees, cutbacks is always a little bit tough. So the way we've told them is, hey, let's put this stuff into like a safety cushion cookie jar almost, right? It's not that we're taking that budget away from you permanently. We're just suggesting you not spend that right now. And if things pick up, that money will come back to you, right? But if things don't, right, you're going to be glad that you didn't spend that and have to make a more painful cut, right? These are things that are kind of more discretionary already. And so we've done that with various departments as part of the replan. I think that messaging has worked well. And so we know what we can, like I said, put away for our rainy day fund. But at the same time, we also want to be prepared if our business is not impacted and we see great opportunities, we want to be able to take advantage of that.
Hey, Will, in terms of, when we emerge from this, when you see, what do you think are the 2 or 3 things beyond having a great cash position to invest in the future that you'd like to see LucidWorks have as we come out of this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what I think when dealing with so much of the negative implications, you can also look at what type of transformation is going to occur. And what we see is an acceleration of really digital transformation, right? Companies embracing distributed work, companies relying more on sort of headless, multi-tenanted types of technologies and services in which they can quickly get to value, get things deployed with little investment. And so our goal throughout this period of kind of slowness, if you will, is to really focus on giving ourselves enough leverage so we can come out of this ready for these new opportunities. You know, again, with our technology, the way that we use data and machine learning to really serve insights and information to people, we believe that this has always been critical in this sort of era of consumerization of IT and people's expectations of everything should feel like Google, feel like Amazon. Now it's going to be critical because we serve a lot of the Global 2000. They are earlier in their journey towards adopting remote work policies, even adopting some sort of newer technology paradigms. And so we're seeing a dramatic acceleration, and we just want to be sure that we're ready to capture that when everybody kind of gets back to being 100% focused and 100% working.
Okay, great. Now, we know that we can control our costs because that is something in our control. We can measure it. We can see the impact of every decision right away. What we can't tell is on customer acquisition, revenue acquisition. Randy, going over to you, how are you thinking about, what are the signs you're looking at to start thinking about investing in revenue and acquiring revenue? How are you modeling it, thinking about it? How's your leadership team thinking about it?
Right. So the first thing we're doing is we're dissecting our customer database. We've got about 60,000 B2B customers. And so we're basically twisting and taking a different lens on that, where we're really looking at industry, geography, and trying to determine, like, obviously, well, you know, Jason mentioned, you know, the couple of the portfolio companies that are doing well. Some of them we know have expansion plans and are likely to continue with those expansion plans. But certainly our customers that are in the New York area are going to take longer to bounce back. So we're first going through and identifying those customers that are in industries that are likely to come out of this even stronger, and in regions or geographies, like, let's say, you know, Indiana or Indianapolis, that's being less hard hit. Again, I guess everyone's being less hard hit than New York City. So we're going to start focusing and dialing up all of our acquisitions in those areas first, and taking all of our best practices. I think that we have two types of acquisition we do. Some of it's transactional and other of it's upper funnel, and really balancing that. But it's really important that we start filling the top of our funnel as soon as possible. Given, you know, it could take 2 to 3 months for somebody to get through our funnel. So we're prioritizing upper funnel over transactional as we, you know, get more clarity, when we get more clarity into when folks will be kind of going back to work. Is it going to be, you know, early May, or is it going to be early June or July? But we are prepared. And the other big thing that we've done is we've kind of got a whole set of value propositions here at Pop, and what are the value propositions that worked 2 months ago are no longer as good, as strong as some of these other value propositions that we've always had that didn't resonate. Well, now that has shifted. So things like, you know, being able to, we have customers now that want to outfit their 500 employees at home. So being able to ship, instead of shipping 500 desks and chairs to one office, we have the platform, the ability to ship 500 desks and chairs to 500 different homes. Things like our tool-free assembly. You know, now, you know, somebody can set up a desk in 60 seconds. That was never as valuable in the old world, because we would just bring in installers and they didn't care if it took 60 seconds or took 6 minutes. It wasn't important then, but those things are now, so we're now changing our messaging, not our branding, but our messaging to focus on, you know, hey, we're made for this moment. This is where we are actually going to outshine our competitors.
That's great. Yeah, Isaac, I know that you lived through creating demand during a time of uncertainty, the economic crisis of 2008. Now you've been watching it through the lens of being a venture capitalist across our portfolio. Going back, what advice would you give CEOs in terms of how they should evaluate demand signals? How should they think about investing in customer acquisition?
The main thing that I want to remind people is to not neglect product strategy. It's easy right now to focus on cost reduction and you know, how to better forecast the sales pipeline. If we're in for an extended contraction here, what many customers will be interested in is saving money. And so how do we move our messaging towards this product saves you money? How do we move our product features towards this product saves you money? We've been in a period where talent was very, very hard to get, where people wanted to do machine learning, they wanted to do new innovations, they wanted to do transformations, and they just couldn't get the people, so they were looking for efficiency for their people. If that changes, some of it will be the same. We need to do more with fewer people. How can our product help with that? Some of it will be different. People is not really the problem now. Cost is the problem. How do we save money? So I think products in a downturn which appeal to that idea of saving money in some way or making people more efficient, being able to leverage what you have is really what to look for, and that affects product marketing, product strategy, go to market, and demand generation. Where you look, who you target, and what kind of message you send.
Will, did you have something to add to that? It sounded like you did.
Oh, no, I mean, I absolutely. And I think one of the other key areas, I mean, I talk about investing in yourselves, but I think just to double down on what Isaac said about, investing in some of your core competencies. I mean, we are constantly just bombarded with sort of just intensity and forward motion, especially in being a startup. You're going from growth to capital raises to trying to grow even faster. And so taking advantage of the time in which you can actually go back and address technical debt, where you can invest in more innovative features and functionalities. We're pulling 2 releases forward this year just because we've been giving a little bit of breathing room throughout the company to prepare to get these things ready and get these things out. So, you can take advantage of that, but it's a great time to build out your research and development, talent acquisition. I remember this in 2008. I was at Splunk. We were about 3 years into the business and the world kind of fell apart, but we were able to go out and bring in some wonderful people onto the team that really helped build the business that's there today. So there's a lot of advantages there if you look for the right opportunities and you don't shy away. I mean, it takes courage definitely to say we're going to continue with our conviction and our vision. We're going to be capital efficient and disciplined in our execution, but we're not going to waver in what we believe the future can be for the business.
Okay. Evan, on our customer base at Lean Data, we've got 2 segments: small, mid-sized business. We've got smaller companies and bigger companies. How are you thinking about customer retention and ensuring that ARR base that we have, I assume, is one of the key assets of the company, both the customer relationships and the actual revenue, the customer contracts? How are you thinking about retaining it? What are the tactics, strategies that you're using? You touched on some of that earlier with making customers feel good, customer marketing, et cetera. Is there anything more tangible? How are you thinking about it? Any tips for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the time where you have to double down really on truly helping your customers be successful, right? So this whole idea of customer success, really understanding their businesses. Ironically, we're actually seeing 2 sets of things. There are certain customers who are seeing huge influxes on their systems overload. So some of our customers are benefiting and seeing huge upticks. They're actually taking up a lot of time from our engineering team because they're dealing with unprecedented scale challenges as they're getting more demand. And so we have to make sure our systems can adhere to them and that they can take advantage of this opportunity. So overinvest in kind of the engineering resources and the support resources to make sure that they stay successful in this environment. On the flip side is make sure we're being more proactive, right? Every customer success team talks about being more proactive. This is definitely an environment where the customers you're not hearing from are the ones, because they're too busy something, are the ones you need to make sure you're proactively engaging with, right? Understand and be empathetic around, hey, I get it. You're in the travel business. You've seen a huge downturn, right? How can we help them be, like Isaac said, more efficient and help them save money? And they want you to be a little bit more proactive, but at the same time, you don't want to be a nuisance to them. Really understand that they have other things on their mind. So I think this is the time and place where your motions around the customer experience and post-sales and how you help them and are truly a partner with them really needs to shine through. And it's time that you just don't say those words, but you are actually there and prove your value to them, whether or not they're doing extremely well or they're really struggling, or they're just they're busy. So
before we turn it over to the audience questions, I have one question that I'd like all 4 former CEOs, or even Jason, who did run his own company or ran a company at Walmart, to comment on, which is, and we'll start with Isaac and then go around. What do you need, or when you were a CEO, what did you need from your board during a time like this? And what do you not need?
I think the thing that was helpful to me from my board was their more global perspective. So tracking what's going on, seeing the trends, giving me that information about how long the timing might be. It's hard to pay attention to that when you're heads down with your team, trying to replan a bunch of stuff and trying to keep customers going. So that global perspective. And the other thing is just a little bit of private time. It's a very lonely job to be the one trying to orchestrate all this. And you are at least I was the person sort of receiving everybody's worry, everybody's issues, everyone's consternation, and no one was hearing about, like, it wasn't appropriate to tell them how I was feeling those things too. And so that is a place that the board could help me, was just sort of being that, sort of a free shrink a little bit.
Since you told us what you needed, Will, what do you not need from the board? What is harmful?
I mean, the distraction is definitely harmful. I mean, to Isaac's point, some, support and sometimes just an ear to listen to, 400 articles a day about how folks are dealing with the COVID virus and adjusting to new working life balance is definitely not helpful. Additional noise where, look, everybody is going to be hyper-focused on cost. Everybody's going to be hyper-focused on getting transactions done, retaining the existing business. So I don't need any reminders about that. But, perspectives of what's happening globally, what they're seeing within the portfolio, and really just checking in, right? To Isaac's point, it's definitely it's a tough and lonely job in any situation, but particularly when, the burden is as high as it is. And again, team members are going through so many different personal challenges. You absorb it all, and it's hard, but it's definitely a time where leadership is critical and can be very, again, advantageous to the business if we navigate it correctly.
Okay. And Randy or Evan, maybe you can comment on this. If a board member is bombarding you with things that is creating noise and distraction and is not, how would I call it, parsing what they're asking you, assuming that, not, how do you handle that? What's the best way to handle that so that you can get the space you need to operate?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is hopefully, as you, like Randy had talked about, that you have a good culture going in. Hopefully you have a good relationship with your board going in. And specifically, I'll be honest, having gone through a previous financial crisis on the investor side, I specifically chose board members such as Shasta that I thought that I really wanted one thing above all. It wasn't a brand name. It wasn't, how much capital. The one thing I really wanted was that I knew I could trust them. And so that's the mantra that I'm trying to convey to my employees, is that you can trust myself and the management team. And that's what I'm looking for my board as well, is that there is a level of trust that we can be very transparent with each other, and that we're going to have a plan, and we're going to believe in each other, because that eliminates that distraction. So hopefully, if you have a trusting relationship with your board, you can just remember, you can kindly be like, hey, I've kind of got this, right? And here's what we're doing about it. This is what I'm actually focused my attention on. So it can be a nice conversation versus having to be something where you are spending cycles dealing with a distraction, when you really want to spend those cycles dealing with either your customers or employees or other folks that, need that attention. Because I think that's the most important thing for me throughout the whole crisis is this trust. And I want the trust of the board, and I also want the trust of employees. And you got to balance and manage. Different people need different things in order to establish that.
Okay. Randy, I'm going to give you this next question from the audience. It's a couple of people have asked the same thing, which I think is a good one, is how should one take advantage of the CARES Act if they can? How do you approach it? How do you deal with the fact that everyone's telling you to take advantage of it with the email overloads, and every law firm is reaching out to you? How do you manage that process so that you prioritize the right activities? And then what do you do to take advantage of what's available?
Right. Well, look, I'll say that this didn't require much thought on our part. Our team, between my head of finance and my general counsel, immediately got informed, got up to speed. Our application is ready to go when the Comerica link goes live tomorrow on their website for SBA applications. Ours is going to be first in line, our relationship with them. And we're going to at least, see, we've evaluated everything. We've got a few changes that we need to make to board structure to make that a reality, which we will get done quickly. But our team was just on it from day one. It wasn't, every day there's new information coming out about it, but when they finally put their stake in the ground, we immediately figured out which area we qualified for, how much we're going to qualify for, and just put it into action. And again, the door opens tomorrow, and we're going to be first in line.
And then you just deleted all the other emails, I assume.
Exactly. It's too many to delete.
Okay. Just any of you can comment on this. How do you see it seems like, that this happened in the UK a while ago, that once work from home began to be prevalent through the London Olympics, people didn't want to come back to work. They just wanted to work from home. So how do you lead people when they're working from home? Anybody can jump in. Free for all.
I think as a CEO, it's an interesting challenge because, again, having that connectivity to the business and understanding at a people level what's really happening. What I found is sort of a two-way kind of in bolstering communication. Every other week, I effectively write a letter to the company, not just sort of an email or a note, but kind of a well thought out sort of structured communication of just kind of sharing perspectives that I'm seeing, what I'm dealing with personally, what I'm trying to manage, and where I'm spending my time, and then really engaging in departmental level meetings. And so you can't really do the flyby, talk to somebody by the refrigerator, ask them how it's going. And so joining, even 3-4 person kind of departmental meetings or meetings in and around initiatives and just being present. I think we have to change the way we conduct meetings. I think it's very easy to fall into this oblivion of, I'm doing 12 Zoom calls a day for 12 hours. I wasn't meeting for 12 hours in my normal life. Why am I doing this now? So I think there needs to be a little bit of a moratorium. And so even putting in place, we don't do meetings on Thursday afternoon and Wednesday mornings, or having those kind of strict guidelines so we can ensure that people are also having a chance to be productive, but being present and engaging as much as possible to the extent that it's practical, and doing it at a level where you're really hearing kind of what's happening on the ground, not just from kind of management KPIs and reporting.
Yeah, so I think also one best practice we've just kind of seen is just, it's having standing meetings. Engineering's always done standing meetings, but it's crossing the people so that people have a forum to get together, so that they can share and get the day going is something that we see we've encouraged a lot of teams to do. Myself, I've done CEO office hours, so I'll just carve out 30 minutes every day and just open it up to anyone at the company who can come by and talk about anything, right? And so just being able to be accessible, and it's only 30 minutes of my time. It's not that much meeting time, but folks knowing that they have that avenue to have that banter that would happen in the hallway, and that's there. I think it's helpful.
So in order to kind of get that kind of management by walking around principle that we all heard about, to get the pulse of the organization, office hours, is that the best? That seems to be effective for you, Evan?
That's what I've been trying, and it's I've been trying for the last couple of weeks. Yes.
I'm going to add one thing, because I've talked to, this is true of just how we're running our venture firm, which is small with about, 30 or 35 employees, but also when I used to be an operator and had more than 1,000 people. And I've talked to a bunch of companies, CEOs recently in the last week. I think because we're all in front of our computers a lot, because we're on Zoom, there's a weird different effect, which is that email threads are spooling up quicker and more people are chiming into things because the response times are faster. And so one of the things that we've done inside of Shasta, and one of the things that a bunch of CEOs, including really large companies, have done, is said, when they start to see that, is assign a very clear owner to it. Potentially organize a very quick call, an actual phone call or Zoom with the 3 or 5 or 10 key people that are on some thread about something. Talk through it really quickly. We did this last night internally at Shasta on a matter, but then also assign an owner to it so that that person knows who's actually going to take care of it and own it, because otherwise things can just continue to spool in this virtual world.
Randy and Will, that's good feedback. Randy and Will, any tips on how to keep the pulse of the organization beyond office hours? Any other ideas?
Be present. I mean, I can't emphasize enough.
How?
Well, so it's one thing to show up at a, say there's a departmental meeting of 50 to 100 people. I mean, you can always go and kind of give a little bit of an address. Finding those pockets where you can get with 3 or 4 folks that are core executioners that are going to be looking at certain initiatives and really getting that feedback. And I think, I've always done this kind of in person, just literally barge into a conference room and tell me what's going on. But now just kind of being more proactive of working with the teams and understanding when they're meeting and just popping in. I think the transparency, office hours is probably the most effective thing you can do, but also just finding ways to solicit input that may not come to you otherwise, and having an ear, right? You have to listen for the language that's being said, not just on the surface, but what's really behind the words, and understanding the impact that that's having on people gives you an opportunity to act on those things as they emerge. But staying ahead, I tell the team right now, our #1 job right now is control our destiny, which means we cut costs. I love what Evan said. You know what? We're not eliminating programs. We're not eliminating hiring. We're giving ourselves more room so we can withstand whatever occurs. If it's new revenue this year, so be it. Let's be sure that we're in a position to ride that out, and the rest will just be upside.
I'm doing what I always tell my salespeople to do, which is pick up the phone. I'm just calling my folks. If I see something on Slack and I could easily respond on Slack, I just pick up the phone, I call, we start talking, I start asking, and then I kind of get that water cooler talk there of, hey, yeah, we just had this other meeting and this issue came up and we're thinking about this other thing. And so just kind of in the same way of me kind of walking through the office and having those same conversations, I now just do it, and I do it up and down the organization. I don't just do it with my leadership team. I just check in randomly, as I know, people might be working on certain things, just to say, hey, how you doing? How's your wife? How are your kids? And oh, by the way, how's this thing?
So that's great. That's very tangible.
One more thing that I think is really effective that our people team has been doing is we've been hosting virtual just coffee sessions, co-working sessions. People just log in, 30, 40 people on a Zoom, just kind of doing business as usual. We have something we call Lucid Talks, where we take about 30 minutes and people present on hobbies. Someone just did one today about fitness and self-care as a result of, everything going on, how to set up a home workout schedule and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of just even non-work types of engagement that you can encourage and actually build a practice, whether we do these things virtually or even as we come back together.
So 3 things: office hours, watch what people are saying and pick up the phone and connect one-on-one. 3, use the time to build community through different ways. Those are 3 great tips for people. Now, this is a question for investors. So Isaac and Jason, you can shine finally, and with your investor hat on. There's one of the participants has a great company. They've got 30 million in revenue in data tech. They're break even. They need to raise money to build their sales team. COVID's actually helping them. Can they raise a Series B in this environment, or are they wasting their time? And if they can, how should they go about it?
Isaac, you want to go first?
Sure. I think it's a little, right now what I see around is that many investors are pausing to try to understand the market. But one thing to remember is that there is still capital available, and investors will want to put that to work. I think that they will be looking for quality companies like this as soon as it becomes more clear how to value those companies and what their potential growth trajectory would be. So maybe pausing a short while, but I think that quality companies will always receive funding. And if you have a great business, this is as good a time as any time.
Yeah, I'd say that just as a data point, we had 3 high quality companies that were in fundraising in the last month that were supposed to be at final partners meetings in the last 2 weeks. And all those final partner meetings got canceled. So I think we're at this particular moment at a point in time of uncertainty where most investors are working on their portfolio, helping companies and trying to coach through this, as we've talked a lot about today. And I just don't think there's going to be much new investment for some period of time. I don't know if that's 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 quarters, but you're probably not going to get financed in the next week or 2. So my specific advice to any company that I'm involved with that's fundraising is pause that for now. And when the world looks a little bit more certain, then go back to market. And as Isaac said, then there will be capital available for great businesses. The diligence process will likely be longer than you thought or expected. The price will probably be lower than you had hoped for because that's what happens during market resets.
Now to something that's tactical but very practical. How are you all handling different contracts that you have already signed and asking those vendors and contractors for either deferment of fees, reduction of fees, or working your way out of contracts? Is there any types of best practices, or like, is it just, hey, you know, times are tough, do me a break, give me a break? Is that the approach? Or what ideas can you employ with these contracts that you might have gotten into, that you might need reductions on? Anyone?
I mean, I can go ahead. I mean, you know, I think two things are important. I mean, I think it was Evan who touched on it, maybe Randy, about, you know, you empathize with your employees, you empathize with your customers. In an ideal situation, your vendors are your partners. And so, you know, having empathy there and trusting the integrity of that relationship is important. I think transparency, right? Here's where we're at. Here's what we're facing. And here's what a worst case scenario potentially looks like. So having a conversation now and finding some relief is a way to mitigate a larger, more negative consequence to the relationship if we don't do something right now. I don't think you can just blindly say, hey, things are tough, give me a break, you know, because again, that's not honoring that relationship, and that's no way to really conduct a partnership, but really being honest with yourself and with your vendor partners in terms of where things are and why they have you concerned, and then get creative. Right? We're doing this in a number of our transactions. We're getting creative on payment terms. We're getting creative in the way that we contract and the way that we handle cancellations, because we understand that there's a little bit of uncertainty right now and people are hesitant sometimes to go too big and too long. But that doesn't mean that they still don't have objectives and initiatives in which we are an important piece of that we can help power.
Yeah, I agree with that. With Will's thing is just being think of these as long-term relationships. It's not transactional, and just be honest with them. I think certainly in the last downturn, I mean, if you have a situation where your revenue's really been hit hard, right? I mean, landlords are some of the toughest to ever negotiate with, but they get the long-term picture versus the short-term picture. But you got to be in dire straits. I mean, if you're not quite seeing that, then you're just asking for a break. But sometimes it's not. Don't be afraid to ask, right? You can't get what you don't ask for. One of our brokers, we were actually in the midst of a move, ironically, and we just said, hey, you know, we don't know with the shelter in place, and they were like, oh yeah, you can start a month later. It wasn't a big deal for them, and we're like, okay, that gives us a little bit of room to figure out some things, and that was nice of them. But we didn't go to them saying demanding it. We were just like, hey, you know, we don't know if the contractors can come in and those type of things. So can't be afraid to ask, but at the same time, be empathetic to them, because you want to have a relationship with those folks for the long term with your good vendors.
I would say we've had success probably with 95% of our partners, starting with all of our factory partners giving us extended payment terms in China, to our warehousing, our trucking, our landlords. We've got landlords who've given us months and months of free rent now, in the spirit of partnerships, and that, you know, we would renew. Others that have said no, but communicating to them exactly where we are, that we are financially strong, that we've taken these actions, and here's why we believe we're going to emerge even stronger. And having that dialogue has paid off in spades with those key partners. Certainly going to folks like, you know, Salesforce or LinkedIn Sales Navigator and saying, hey, I just laid off X number of people. Do I still have to pay for those seat licenses? You know, they give you the big middle finger and say, yeah, keep paying for those. But our true partners, the people acting in the true spirit of partnership, are working with us. And we're not, again, even the where we're getting rent relief, we're still going to be, you know, our intention is to still pay that when we can, to pay back that.
I think there's one other angle on cost reduction, which is, because most of what we've talked about today has been around what do we do right now to get through, to deal with the reduction in demand, to maintain customers. The next component is, how do we lean in for the future? And we talked a little bit about that. Will said very specifically, hey, and Isaac said, think about your product strategy and how to invest and emerge on the other side. Another place, and I've started to have these conversations with CEOs, and Randy and I had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not going to go into the specifics because I don't want to give anything away, but I've encouraged CEOs to start thinking about what can you do right now to take advantage of this opportunity to invest in a way that lets us emerge on the other side with a competitive advantage. And so are there contracts, are there people, there are things that we want to do where we can potentially cut a sweetheart deal for the future that gives us 2, 3, 4 years of competitive advantage, be it a lease, a software item, hiring ahead. And look, we clearly need to be in an environment where we have to pay attention to cash, but there's the flip side balance of that, which is how do you invest and emerge on the other side? And that's something that we did very heavily at Walmart.com in 2000 when the crash happened. We cut back, but we built for the future.
Sorry to cut you off. I know you're used to it with me, but we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. Our webinar is ending in a minute. There are a lot of resources that we are going to post if you follow us at Shasta on our Twitter and with all of the different things that we're doing, resources that we're going to post. One of our companies, Data World, has got a great post on accumulating information on the coronavirus. That'll be listed on our Twitter feed as well as on our site. And please subscribe to what we're posting to help everybody. Okay. Thank you, Will, Jason, Isaac, Randy, and Evan for your time and your perspective. I've learned a lot, and I hope others have as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.